guys, I'm Layla. Welcome to Raidlore Stories. So today's lore story is going to be for Ugir the Wyrmeater. He happens to be kind of like the newest fragment champ that was added into the game. He does have a really interesting look on him. I mean, that's a triceratops on his shoulder, right? Really cool design. Very cool aesthetic, and he's part of the Ugir tribe. I am curious, what his lore story's got to say about that. I mean, it almost makes me excited thinking that maybe they'll add some dinosaurs in here eventually. Though, I mean, technically the lizardmen are probably the closest thing, right? So let's check out his lore story. Among the colonies of the Dragon Empire of old was an archipelago in the east of the great island chain of Torsil and Estrive, later known as the Lost Isles. Called Marutoba, this island cluster was ruled by an Ogrin warlord and former Dragon auxiliary named Ugir, but was subject to the directives of the Dragon Emperor. Ugir's tribe provided manpower for the empire in exchange for their semi-independence. Dragon rule had always sat ill with Ugir and his people, but the relationship scoured further as the emperor made ever greater demands. Imperial forces were mobilizing for an expedition through the newly constructed Brimstone Gate, and more of Ugir's people were being conscripted. All complaints were ignored, and the Dragon began to employ force. That was their first mistake. After hearing about Ogrin being kidnapped and enslaved, Ugir took action. He killed and skinned one dragon overseer and wrenched the horns from another. He ordered him to return to his emperor and tell him Marutoba would serve no longer. The response was predictable. A dragon fleet arrived, transporting an imperial army to quash Marutoba's rebellion. Ugir's people were outnumbered, but the odds not concerned the Ogrin. His time in the imperial legions had taught him the dragon's tactics well. The dragon thought of Ogrin as brutal and simplistic, and expected to engage in a pitched battle, where their superior tactics and numbers would see them victorious. Their landing was uncontested, something they assumed would merely be the first of a host of tactical blunders made by their unsophisticated foes. But as they advanced into the jungles covering the interior, they found themselves ambushed by Ogrin again and again, who cut off and massacred advance parties, using the attacks to lure in reserves who they in turn encircled and crushed. Dragon casualties mounted. Ugir's Ogrin also employed terror tactics, leaving severed heads and skinned reptilian hides along the paths being used by the invaders. Ugir himself accentuated his armor with bones and skin of bony horns and crests of the dragon he killed, and crafted a jagged bone axe from their remains. His greatest victory came when they slew the expedition's commander during a daring raid. Later in that same battle, Ugir was bested by the great reptilian demi-worm the commander often rode into battle. But the Ogrin met the beast head-on, wrestling it down and cutting its gullet with a vicious slash of his axe. He later devoured its carcass. In doing so, he claimed to have consumed the very spirit of the monster and earned himself the name Wyrmeater. While the Ogrin's resistance was great, their defiance could not endure forever. A new dragon commander was appointed. He adopted a more meticulous strategy, using his superior numbers to strangle resistance. His fleet cut off one island at a time. Dragon took to felling the jungle, restricting the areas in which the Ugir could employ their devastating tactics. Ugir and his warriors were eventually isolated on the last free island of Marutoba, where they prepared for one more stand. But a valiant death at the hands of the Dragon Empire was not the Wyrmeater's destiny. Wider events intervened in the war for Marutoba. Seros forces in Enethrat had defeated the Dragon incursion and now were spilling into Teleria, assaulting every part of the empire. Ugir was horrified by the twisted demonic newcomers with their warped dragon forms and the terror slaughter they inflicted, but held a quiet hope he could take advantage of their invasion. It granted him and his warriors a welcome reprieve. He also agreed to a cautious, temporary alliance with the leader of the Enethrad forces sent to Marutoba, Kravakaz. The Dragonkin, already thrown into disarray by desperate orders from the Emperor to return to defend the fleet city of Twin Rift, were easy prey to the combined might of Demon Spawn and Ogrin. For Ugir, the victory was short-lived. Kravakaz acclaimed Marutoba in the name of the Shadow God. Ugir had been preparing for such an eventuality, however, hoarding captured Dragonkin ships and striking up a pact with Dragonkin prisoners, agreeing to free and arm them if they would wreak vengeance on the demon spawn. The efforts of the Empire to drive out the Ogrin had been moderate compared to what the demon spawn unleashed when Ugir refused to submit. Monstrosities rampaged the remaining jungle, and Kravakaz conjured demonic fires to sear away both forest and Ogrin alike. Still, Ugir fought on. It was no longer a battle for freedom, but a fight for survival. He led from the front, and his experience at hit and run tactics was bolstered by the bitter resistance offered by the surviving dragonkin. Ultimately, the wider demonic invasion of Teleria failed. Kravakaz and his legion were forced to withdraw. They left behind ravaged islands, but inhabitants who were free. Though few Ogren had survived, their legacy would endure, thanks to the ceaseless leadership, strength, and brute determination of Ugir the Wyrmeater. Okay, so I do like how in the story, at least, they basically explain why he's got this dinosaur head on his shoulder, right? So yeah, basically, the Ogren and the lizard men were at odds together, and they're basically dragons as well too, right? Dragons and dinosaurs. Guys, drop me some comments down below what you think for the lore story for Ugin the Wyrmeater, and thank you so much for watching.